Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, first off. And my name is Beth Van Tine. I am an education and math instructor. And I want to begin by asking the question, has anyone ever felt kind of a sickening feeling in the gut of their stomach whenever maybe a math problem was brought up or math in general was the topic? And so I want you to know that you're not alone. This is something that has been a discussion in many of my education classes and math classes. So you're not alone. And today I'm here to try to share some practical strategies that will help you maybe rethink your relationship with math. And if it so happens that you happen to already really enjoy math, I'm hoping that you can also gain some strategies that will help you with maybe some of those that you know that don't necessarily enjoy math. So I want to take a deep dive into breaking the cycle, how to unhate math. Couldn't help myself on that. So I want to begin by just a little bit about me. I am a first-generation college student in my family. I was the first one to go to college. I grew up on a small farm, and I need to let you know a secret. Well, it's not really a secret. I let anybody know this. I struggled with algebra the first time I saw it. I remember distinctly seeing letters being put on the board, and I was very frustrated to see letters instead of numbers. So I'm there with you on if you've ever had that feeling, and I think it's important to note that it took me some willpower and maybe a little bit of stubbornness to just roll my sleeves up and work through it. So I also experienced gender bias in a high school math classroom, and that looks like this, where I would be working on a math problem and the person would say, well, the reason why you can't understand it is because you're a girl. So it made me dig my heels in and try to prove them wrong. And at this point in time, I've taught over half my life. I've spent over half my life teaching math. So I really did go to the extremes on trying to prove them wrong. So with that, I thought that might at least set a little bit of a frame around what I'm going to present. I also want to just head on talk about the elephant in the room, or some classrooms, is just reasons to dislike math. And if I haven't covered one that you are feeling by the time I get to the top 10, I definitely want to hear it. So kind of similar to the gender bias, I've heard of students say that they were just told that they weren't good at math. I've also had students say, well, my parents weren't good at math, so I'm not either. So relating it to genetics. Then I also have heard the argument that math is just a bunch of things to memorize. I just don't get it. I don't see the connection. It also is kind of I shouldn't say kind of, it really is a societal issue where it does not come across as, it's very cool to enjoy or like math. In the 90s, Barbie was even had a recording that played the phrase, math class is hard. And so that is, how many girls were affected or influenced by just that Barbie saying that they were struggling in math. So there's also this idea that you have to be really fast to do math. And if you're a reflective thinker, that can come into play. Math is difficult. I just talked with one of my classes this week, and they said, you need to make sure you put that one on there. It's just tough sometimes. If this is something I struggled with asking for help. I'm very independent, and sometimes I even struggled with asking for help if I needed it. Or being afraid of wrong. That's a common cause to dislike math because there's one right answer. Sometimes it relates to a bad experience in a classroom, like a personality clash with the teacher. And then I wanted to wait on that one. I was going to ask him. So a big one that also comes about is, where am I ever going to use this? So how did I do on the top 10? Is there any that I should have included that I didn't? Okay, I think I got it. I took several polls this last couple of weeks with my classes. So the first thing I want to get into is talk about why study math. So I think it's important to know a little bit about the why, and hopefully if you're maybe procrastinating doing a math assignment or putting off taking a math class, this might help you see some reasons why it's important to study math. So the slide I just had, it says increase smartness. Well, how? I'm going to compare this to athletes lifting weights. They lift weights to prepare for the game, but you don't see them carrying weights around on the court or the field. So math is not just about finding X, it's about the journey that you take to get there. So math in itself can help you learn how to overcome obstacles. It can help you think creatively. Yes, math minds can be very creative. And ultimately, it helps you learn how to learn, which is a really important skill to have in life, especially as things change so constantly. It also develops skills employers want, like problem solving and logical reasoning. And fun fact, Abraham Lincoln was struggling as a lawyer and was really struggling with writing speeches. And he studied the first 6 books of Euclid all on his own. And that is, those books are considered the foundations of geometry. The reason why he studied them is because he wanted that logical reasoning that you gained from thinking through math and thinking through proofs in geometry. And to better organize his speeches, obviously that's something that if you're trying to convince somebody in the courtroom, that's a very important skill to have. And then obviously eventually as a presidential candidate, trying to convince the public of what you believe and why you believe it. So I think that's extremely important to see. We don't think of Abraham Lincoln as being a mathematician. Something else, STEM occupations, if you like having a little extra money in your pocket, the STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, which is going to involve some math in any of the classes that you take that relate to that. The median salary was around $95,000 in 2021 compared to non-STEM jobs, which is closer to $40,000. So I just wanted to plant that seed also if you're interested in having a little extra cash. This is a shout out to Shelley and the statistics. And graphs can be in particular made to lie, or numbers in general can be made to lie. I highly recommend if you get a chance to take a statistics class, I really wish every single person would take that class because you are a consumer of numbers. And whether you realize it or not, just like the dog trying to convince the family, he did the numbers, or did the math, and they just simply can't afford the cat. My guess is they probably can't. So one example that is a very common one that is very actually easy to spot if you're onto it is looking at a graph and looking at the y-axis or the x-axis. If you change or manipulate the axis, you change the story. And so this is a graph that makes Chevy look really good. Well, if you look closer to the axis, it starts at 95%. If we redraw the graph from 0 to 100%, you actually see that it was much more exaggerated on purpose by Chevy to try to convince the audience that they're doing so much better than everybody else. Then another really quick one, if you ever remember hearing a headline come across that chocolate can help you lose weight, I actually remember this headline. This was a study that was created, it was created to be flawed on purpose to prove the point that the media isn't really looking behind the numbers before they throw it out to the public. And so this was a study done with just 16 subjects over a very short period of time, so it was very flawed. And of course the results came out the way John Bohannon is the one that ran this study. They came out the way that he wanted them to, where it made it look like chocolate really does help you lose weight. And as soon as he posted that, he didn't even really publish it officially. He just put it on a website that he created that kind of looked like it was official. It spread to over 20 countries and was featured in Shape magazine. And so if anything I want you to get out of this is look behind the numbers before you just believe them for face value. So, the next, life skills. This is just something, me personally, I like to save money whenever possible. Do-it-yourself projects do help save money. My husband and I have done a lot of projects together, from building sheds. I've had to whip out trigonometry to help try to make sure that the sides were square. I've had to use geometry, of course, for pouring concrete. That's something you don't want to be wrong at because it's kind of expensive. You don't want to order too much or not enough. And there's all sorts of other ways. Ratios we've used with fly prevention for our small little hobby farm. Percentages, anytime you go to figure tips, that's when you'll be a cool person, when you can figure the tip for everybody sitting at the table. So that's just a little background for me. I've used a lot of the math that I've taught outside of the classroom. And then this one is something that, to me, it's a poster I found that I think does a great job showing that math really does actually exist everywhere, including nature and space. There's all sorts of really interesting ways that something that looks very chaotic actually is predictable with mathematical equations. So if you ever get a chance, take a look at that. It really is a cool thing to explore. So as far as why study math, hopefully that gives you some reasons why you might want to think about taking a look at math. And then I want to show you a few familiar faces. I'm going to kind of do a little quiz here. It's not really intense. It's just seeing if you recognize any of these particular faces. The gal on the left, do you recognize her from the Big Bang Theory? Mayim Bialik, she's a neuroscientist actually. So she has a PhD in neuroscience. And she would have taken classes like statistics, calculus, and extensive knowledge of quantitative analysis. And so she's had quite a bit of math in her background, but yet we don't really necessarily realize that. So the next one, recognize this guy? Okay, did you know he was a math major? So he was a math major at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I don't think people look at Michael Jordan as being a mathematician either. I'm sure that helped with his spatial reasoning on the court. And then this one's a little more recent. Anybody follow the NFL? Okay, do you recognize this one? Do you know?
Josh Dobbs.
Yes, awesome. Josh Dobbs. Did you know that he was recently signed to San Francisco? I didn't know that until I was looking this up. He's actually got a degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Tennessee. And I will say that the media did actually talk this up and share a little bit of his background. Lastly, this was definitely recent. Caitlin Clark made a lot of headlines with college women's basketball. And she is majoring currently at the University of Iowa in marketing. So she has taken math classes such as advanced chemistry and geometry. I thought it was important for you to see there are some faces out there that actually, they're pretty cool people out there that kind of help make math cool. So with that, this is the meat of my presentation. Here are strategies that I was trying to build up to try, and hopefully these strategies will help you rethink how you feel about math. But before I can get into the strategies, I've got to do a shout out to the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And I have to say that there's certain times where I was guilty of the fixed mindset, especially when I was being made fun of for being a girl in math and science classes. I struggled a little bit. It kind of almost felt like, well, maybe I just wasn't born with good genetics to do the math. Well, come to find out, the growth mindset is actually what I transitioned into without realizing it. I started viewing mistakes as a way to help me learn. And that's what I think a fear is of being wrong, is that tends to squash our enthusiasm towards math instead of focusing on what mistake we made and why we made it, and that each mistake we make actually helps us get better. And so I encourage you to try to view things as a growth mindset. What this looks like, well, if you've ever caught yourself saying, I am never going to understand this, I want you to switch the never, swap it out, and replace yet at the end of the sentence. And so you might not understand this yet. And that is a much more promising statement than just telling yourself you're never going to get it. So the power of yet is very, very powerful. On a bigger scale, I would say create a new mantra for math in general. So I'm not asking you to say that you love math. I did not ask that. So make it believable. Make it something like, well, I know math is tough, but each problem I do, I'm going to get better at it. Write this down and put it where you can view it. Maybe before you head to math class even. Maybe a sticky note on the mirror as you get ready. But place it so that you can start retraining your brain to thinking more positively about whatever subject area that you might be struggling with. So reframing your self-talk about math. That means grant yourself permission to make mistakes. It's okay to mess up. In fact, your brain fires more neurons when you make a mistake and you look at ways to correct it versus just getting the problem correct. Something that I have used in my classes is I've encouraged students to use a different color. Instead of just erasing the mistake, leave the mistake there, cross it out, but put a bold color. Use a bold color to explain briefly, why you missed the problem. Preferably not red, because red is kind of angry, so we don't want to do that for math. So maybe purple or some other bold color where you can actually see both the mistake you made and why you made it. And then in addition to that, diagrams, sketches, anything that you can help distinguish the different steps from one another. I have students switch colors anytime they distribute something. They'll use a different color to make sure they see that that's a different step. Then ultimately make connections to your world. If you are into sports, maybe try connecting a parabola to the free throw shot and the path that the basketball takes. Maybe you're really into music. If you have a formula that you're trying to remember, sing it. I've had a whole class sing it, the quadratic formula to Adele, Rolling in the Deep. It works. And definitely look for the whys. Once you look at the why, you're going to understand it on a much deeper level than just trying to memorize a bunch of random facts. Focus on the process rather than the answer. So I know the answer is wonderful if we get there and we get it correct, but the journey that it takes for you to get there is ultimately more important than just getting the answer correct. I highly recommend, if you don't know your basic math facts, learn them. There are several very fun mathy games online that will help you practice your basic math facts. Go back and learn them. It will help you get a better number sense so that when you're looking at a calculator, you at least know if that answer seems reasonable or not, because you're going to increase your number sense. Ultimately, it's nice if you ask the instructor or the teacher questions, but if something happens and you're just not understanding the teacher, partner up with someone. Just like going to the gym and having a workout partner holds you accountable, a study partner holds you accountable also. This brings me to my next one, which is stop procrastinating. And I am a procrastinator. And this has been a difficult one for me to also work past. But you create a vicious cycle, especially in math. When you put something off, then you're unprepared. You don't do well on the quiz. Then your anxiety skyrockets. And then your lack of confidence decreases. And it's a vicious circle that you put yourself into. And so not only am I suggesting, if you can't partner up, then take advantage of some of the tutoring that is available here on the campus. Sign up for weekly tutoring that's going to hold you accountable and keep you from procrastinating. If tutoring is not an option for you, then set up a weekly time with your study partner. This is something I really, really struggled with. Once I start something, I just can't set it aside. And that's that stubbornness in my personality. I have to say that what works really well is if you get stuck on a problem, work on it, set it aside, take a break, sleep on it even. If you've ever had that feeling where the next day that you walked into the classroom and you suddenly understood what the problem was that you're trying to do, it's because you gave yourself permission to take a break from it. Your brain is still working on it in the subconscious. So give yourself time and take time to work and also take a break. And then ultimately double check, recheck, check to make sure that the previous line matches the current line of the work. A lot of times I've taken one problem and solved it 2 different ways. If I get a match, pretty certain that I'm correct. And so also give yourself time to practice and review, especially when you get towards the end of a unit. If there's a review, do it. Until you, every time you recall information, it helps you learn it better than just for that problem. So there's 10 strategies that I covered. I'm also asking you to go a step further and look at a bigger picture. Not only am I asking you to break the cycle in your own world, I'm asking you to also, in addition to reframing how you talk to yourself, I want you to be careful about projecting your anxiety towards math onto others, especially if those that you're talking to are younger than you, they look up to you. You may not realize, but anytime you say that you hate something, you project that hatred onto, especially if it's a young child, that child is going to feel like they need to hate math also. So just rethink the next time you start to say you hate math and think about who you're talking with. And for children in particular, if you have the opportunity, try to connect math to something fun. Like those math games that I mentioned, it's great if you can get a child having fun while they're learning math. And then ultimately, this is something I stress in my education classes for the growth mindset, especially, is praise the effort instead of how smart they are. If you praise the smartness, you're actually feeding into a fixed mindset. So if they happen to do poorly on an exam, they're not going to understand that they could get better at it if you only praise their smartness. So praise the effort, and this is yourself too. Praise the effort that you put into something rather than trying to focus on the grade itself. So with that, that's what I got for today. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts? Anything that you want to add to this? Yes.
Going back to something you said earlier about like not being able to come up with the answer quickly. I think one thing that we as educators do that we should probably stop doing is stop the timed multiplication tables in elementary school. Because I think a lot of times students internalize that if they can't do it quickly, then that means they're dumb. And if we could take that out of that, you know, it's not that you can quickly find the answer to a multiplication problem. And I know we want them to reach automaticity, but if a kid has to sit there and count on their fingers to figure it out, and that's how they figure it out, we should afford them the time to figure it out. Or if they have to sit there with a piece of paper and figure it out, I'd like to see us afford them the time to figure it out. I just think that's one place in our education system that we could do better.
I'm definitely on board with you on that. And I would say too, if you are a reflective thinker, which I think there's a lot of us that tend to mull things over before we answer a question, I think that sometimes as teachers, we tend to focus on who can answer the quickest and don't necessarily give time to that reflective thinker. And I think that ties in to what you're saying as well. I'm a reflective thinker. I am not the fastest math solver. Give me a little bit of time and I'll get there though. I guarantee it. If nothing else, I've proved that you don't have to be crazy fast at math to still be able to understand it well and be a math person. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Anybody else have thoughts, suggestions? Did I hit a chord with anyone on this? Yes.
I really like my humanities classes that I've taken, like sociology and philosophy, and I'm in American government right now, and I would even consider that like a humanities if it's not, to a certain degree. But what I really like about, what I've really come to appreciate about math in my adult years is, as a very disorganized person with ADHD, for the most part with math is like, there's a set of rules that you're supposed to follow, and then you're supposed to plug in, X and X, and there's a specific answer that you should get, and if you don't get that, then you should be able to like backtrack for the most part to figure out where you got that. So there's always like that security of, this should be a specific answer versus like if I'm writing a paper for Mr. Maher, the answer could be correct, but there could be gray areas about that. You know what I mean?
I really connect with that. Fun fact, I almost became an English major. I couldn't decide at one point in time. And what you just said, I know drew me more towards the math side because I could find a finite answer to it. Writing for me is definitely a struggle. Kudos to those of you that are great writers. That is something I struggle with and cry over sometimes. But my gosh, when I'm done through the process, I'm proud. Like this presentation was a struggle for me to put together. I'm not gifted with wording necessarily. So, but I'm proud of what it turned out to be. Hopefully it helps you reframe how you approach math. And if you're putting off taking a math class, I really encourage you to rethink that because now is a great time in your life to go back or currently to take a math class instead of waiting to go back later on, if you want to make a career change in particular?
I've seen most of them, so we're doing good.
Oh, awesome. And I do greatly appreciate your time. If you happen to already like math, hopefully it will help you maybe understand where someone comes from that doesn't necessarily like math. Maybe it'll help them work through it. Thank you.